Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. You know, it's no mystery, certainly to those who know me, that the bowfin is my all-time favorite species of fish on planet Earth. My history and formation as an angler all draw back directly to that species of fish some 20 plus years ago, during a time before there was social media, before there was really a lot of information sharing, and what information sharing there was online was extremely limited with regards to bowfin. And finding other people passionate about bowfin was very, very difficult, almost impossible. So today, I guess if there's a silver lining in social media, it has really allowed for that kind of streamlined information sharing, the creation of specialty groups, specifically catering to those interested in bowfin, people that have been doing it, people that want to do it. And it is really blowing up and growing in popularity. And I just love to see all the different ways that people are chasing bowfin all over the country, from black waters and swamps down in the deep south, which is what I'm used to tidal basins and marshes of the mid-Atlantic, all the way up to Quebec, Canada, and even people catching them through the ice in the Midwest. And today's guest is especially dialed in and equally captivated on chasing these fish, and he does it largely on the fly. He fly fishes for these things. His name is David Hurley, and he chases bowfin and a whole host of other species on the crystal clear flats of the Great Lakes up in Michigan. So a fish that's often thought of as being just resigned to dark, tucked away, muddy, and disgusting weedy swamps, David is out pursuing these things on wide open, crystal clear, very healthy ecosystems, 100% visibility grass flats on the Great Lakes. And so I find his experience especially interesting. While I do a lot of my fishing for bowfin with stationary baits and a little bit lures, he's chasing them on the fly in a strictly visual pattern, looking for the fish. Now, this is a fish that, by way of evolution, survived unimaginable odds, largely because of its habit of getting into grass, getting into tight places, being otherwise hard to see, hard to find, hard to locate. It is a fish that is exceptionally well blended into its surroundings. And so it presents a very unique challenge as a sight angler. And then you throw in the variable of doing it on the fly. And he seems to have mastered it in a really unique location. You know, when I first saw photos of David Hurley chasing these things, I thought he was in the Keys. Gin clear, like crystal clear, swimming pool level water. A really unique ecosystem to be chasing these fish. And obviously, as an avid bowfin angler myself, we went very heavily into that topic. But David Hurley's also chasing muskie on the fly, these giant freshwater drum. He's chasing common carp, pike, and a whole host of other freshwater fish. He's a very well-rounded angler and just a well-rounded, talented individual. He's a musician. He's working in the medical field, so this is a guy who's eager to serve others. And now he's even getting into guiding other people. So on top of being talented in chasing less promoted species of freshwater fish, he's taken it upon himself to be an ambassador of the species at a larger scale, taking clients out and teaching them and showing them and putting them firsthand in front of these fish that really need to be promoted more than anything else. After following his catches on Instagram for a long time, it was cool to be able to catch up to him, speak to him, pick his brains a little bit, get to compare and contrast our own individual pursuits for bowfin, among other things. and just learn from a guy who likes chasing these kinds of fish in a completely different part of the country. It was a really awesome conversation. I think you'll enjoy it too.
All right, so we're rolling. So David Hurley, am I pronouncing that right?
That's it, man.
It's good to be communicating you the old-fashioned way. Well, we're still behind a screen, but I can hear you. But man, I've been admiring your fishing for a long time, so I'm glad to get you on here because you are another bowfin guy like myself, and so I was like, this is going to be my bowfin guy. I'm not going to even talk about him. I mean, we may go back and forth, but our styles are a little different. But
I want to hear some stuff from you too, man. I've been admiring your bowfin from afar for far long.
Right. Well,
far too long.
We've got a little track we'll follow, but you know, we can venture off the path as much as we want. So we'll definitely go down that rabbit hole. But on top of that, I mean, I'm just, you know, at the end of the day, I like seeing guys that are multi-talented, multifaceted in their approach to fishing. So, I mean, I've been looking at your stuff for years now, and you're fishing the Great Lakes, right? Which is a really interesting place in and of itself. And I don't know, we'll get into the details about that, but I've seen your muskie, your pike, you're doing the carp thing, freshwater drum, the trout, bowfin. So, I mean, you've clearly got a hell of a wonderland in your backyard. But I got to admit, like the first time I saw your fly fishing stuff for bowfin, I thought you were in Florida because your water's crystal clear. It's like 100% visibility. It's got that blue hue to it. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Just, I mean, if you can take me, I don't know, when you first came across, like, why bowfin of all the stuff that you have out there to chase, that seems to be the one that you lean into the most. I'm just kind of curious about your stance on the fish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say that I'm a transplant, first of all. So the Great Lakes areas that I fish are still relatively new to me. I didn't grow up here, so I don't have all negative connotations that fishermen here kind of have towards rough fish. So there's a lot of walleye guys, a lot of fishermen per capita here in Michigan, but most people are walleye, smallmouth, muskie. The bowfin's still a little bit of a target out here. But man, like I didn't know they existed till probably I moved down here in 2014. Was a hardcore fisherman at that time as well. So I was kind of a kid in Candyland, coming from Southern California.
Yeah.
I can start by saying the first bowfin I ever saw, I had no idea what it was. Man, I was fly fishing. I thought it was a catfish at first, and I was like, that's not a catfish. That's something else. I was just sitting there, and it was in clear water. It was in an inland lake, but I dangled a little crayfish in front of that guy, and he ate, and it ate so fierce, just lit up with joy. I had no idea what I had on my line. I called my buddy over. I'm like, "What the hell is this, man? This is the coolest fish." And he told me it was bowfin, and we caught a few a day, and I was enamored by just such a cool fish that lives in the water and lives in the fresh water. And from there, man, we'd come across them every now and then. It was more of like just sort of a rare experience when we saw one, and it was always somebody on the when we I was always kind of jealous. I was never caught the bowfin, but this is well before I started guiding. I've only guided for a season and a half. So we'd see him every now and then, but it was more of a rare occurrence, and we didn't know exactly. We couldn't pattern him. At that point, we were fishing mainly Lake St. Clair, which the top of Lake St. Clair, if you're not from the lake, it's part of the Great Lakes tributary. It's all the same water. It goes from Superior down to Lake Michigan and then Lake Huron, and then from Lake Huron, it spills into Lake St. Clair before it goes into Lake Erie. And so all that waterway, I mean, there's just so much shoreline, and I kind of got into the whole flats fishing deal. That's freshwater drum pretty much got me into that. Like that was
Right.
another species that coming from the saltwater in the Pacific coast, it just was a familiar fish to me, and I fell in love with that fish, and so that got me into the flats game, pursuing that fish, and then I again we started to see these bowfin along the coastline and along these flats that we were fishing in this delta, and it wasn't until probably about 4 years ago we started to really pattern them and figure out exactly what type of habitats they prefer, and at this, like have, I mean, an amazing fishery. Like we them at any one point in time just take a left turn and we'll go find Mr. Bowfin. And it's just they're healthy. They play ball, especially for guiding. You have somebody that's pretty novice, can't really cast. You can go vertical on them. They're not afraid of really anything, and they put up an awesome fight. And they're beautiful prehistoric creatures. And what more can you ask for with an attitude?
Well, that's what I always kind of thought was interesting with that fish, and I'm curious too. Like just geographically, you're way far away from where I'm at. I don't know.
Yeah.
You just have different cultural stances geographically on fish in general, but the sentiment in some southern states is, sometimes they get categorized in like the trash fish. I don't know,
or invasive species,
right? Or sometimes, which is that's an amazing one. But especially further back, I'd say if there's any silver lining with the social media age, it seems like it's been easier to get the correct information out there, and you see more people embracing them. But I don't know. I remember even a decade ago, or a little more than that, it was they're kind of looked at like a negative thing. But even with the strongest detractors or people that said it was some kind of problem fish, everybody always agreed that there's always the but tied to it, but they do fight hard. And then I would always wonder from like a sporting stance, like if you're going out just to have an experience and just enjoy it purely for sport, for the pursuit and the exhilaration of seeing them and catching them, and you have no intentions of keeping anything you catch that day, why is that not a good thing? Like, is that not all that really matters? But I'm kind of curious in your area, like what do people think about them? I mean, are they well received? Are they forgotten about? Do people just not know they exist? I mean, what's the stance on them?
It runs the gamut, but I mean, I spend most of my ecosystem, most of my peers are fly fishermen. I think in the fly fishing world, particularly the bowfin is having like its moment. You got people out there that are kind of big names in the fly fishing community. People like Blaine Chocolate that are very vocal about they're just into bowfin, and they think that's a species that needs to be appreciated more. So within that community, it's a very it's kind of one of the coolest fish right now, or kind of it's under it's having its moment in the light. But man, I mean, just the other day, I was fishing a spot and I saw a bowfin on the shore, and I knew exactly like what happened. Someone had caught that fish and left it up, on the shore to die. And you see people like completely convinced that they're a snakehead or they're invasive species. So I think the general public, there could be a lot more P for that general opinion.
Yeah, I think I don't know. There's this idea that they're maybe pushing out more desirable species too. I don't know what it really stems from.
People complain about muskie same way. It's eating all the walleye in the lake, which is, it's all that I've read, seen. I mean, the science doesn't really support those, theories. I mean, they're predators. They eat fish. But to what extent, I don't think it really has a negative impact.
Yeah, and you mentioned Blaine Chocolate, and I didn't even think about it like that. I do agree, and I don't really do much fly fishing at all myself. It's something I've done. I've even done it for bowfin, but I need to get back into it. But I agree. I think the fly guys kind of look at everything through, I don't know, there's just more of an appreciation for fine details with that group of guys and appreciation for variety of fish. But right along the same route, I mean, guys that you probably know, I know you're familiar with Drew Price over there in
Oh
Vermont.
man, he's such a great guy. Yeah, Drew and
Yeah.
I are
Yeah, y'all have a
absolutely.
very similar approach, even a similar, the same boat,
Mhm.
everything. And I've been
Yep.
talking to Drew for a long time.
Yeah, actually Drew showed me your Instagram page. He's like, you should follow this guy. He's out there doing some cool
yeah,
fucking shit. So.
he's a cool, like, just humble guy, and another multi-species guy that has a special appreciation for both. And then there's another guy down in Virginia that I fish with, Grant Alvis. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff. He does a lot of the snakehead stuff, but he's done some good stuff recently with bowfin, and actually he worked directly with Blaine Chocolate, I think, on some article that Blaine had done. He was actually on Grant's boat at the time. So, you got y'all up there up north, and you got Grant kind of in the middle Atlantic coastal area. There's a young kid that I've been watching lately, this guy named Ellis Wynn. I think he goes by like Half Moon Fly Fishing or something like that on Instagram. Young guy out of Georgia. And he does a lot of fly fishing from like the Okefenokee swamp and all that stuff. So it's definitely catching on. But it's kind of funny, when people start arguing that they, I don't know, outcompete other fish, and you think, okay, well, if you took 2 seconds to look into that species of fish, and you would know how long they've been around, you'd immediately wonder how everything else was able to evolve in the first place during the already
2 seconds.
Right.
Let's think about this for a half a second.
It's an interesting
millions of years. It's been around.
It's funny that your first impression of them, like, you didn't have those blinders on because you'd never heard of them before. So I think a lot of people are the same way, where if your first encounter, like, you're not blinded by somebody else's like seed that they planted in your head or preconceived notion about.
A lot of that, man. It's insane. I've seen bass guys, they're doubled over, and so they think they have the bass of a lifetime, and they realize it's a freshwater drum. All you hear is curse words, but like right before they saw that fish, they were having the time of their life.
Right.
And like, it's like, I wish I could just like erase whatever that is. Like, yourself, cut it off. Fish. It fought. It ate your bait. That's cool. Like, let it go.
Well, interestingly, what I do kind of like about like social media thing now is you can kind of connect with different people, and you can choose who you're going to connect with. I can just block you if I don't like you. I mean, I just won't look at you. But I talk to a lot of international guys because I admire, and obviously, I mean, we all have our bucket list fish, so I'm always trying to, like, build relationships online with authentic people. But I get a lot of guys that message me about, with interest in some of the fish species we have here, and like, I've done the alligator gar thing a few times, and that's like, they're big, they sell themselves, they're an easy sell. It passes the eye test for anybody that's interested in big, interesting fish. But I, like, probably within the last couple of years, I've gotten more inquiries or just out of the blue messages or contacts through my website or my Instagram on bowfin than almost anything else. And I'm like, this is so crazy that it's a lot of the guys, especially in like the southern, Asia area, or like the Indochina region, where they're doing a lot of the snakehead stuff, where snakehead culture is so big. And, they are starting to pick up on these bowfin, and they're going crazy about it. I think I draw parallels to it, like with our native, like, buffalo species. The European guys who are diehard carp guys, they go crazy over the buffalo because of, the parallels they have with their fish. But it's I don't know. I like to see kind of the shift that's taking place as far as how people view them.
Likewise, a lot of people have reached out to me as well. A lot of people.
Right. Well,
it's great.
Just to go a little bit further on the bowfin thing. I know you've done some guiding, and so now that side of it, I get real interested in the idea that somebody. I don't know if your clients are paying for that experience, or they're just like, it's just part of the package that they might encounter. But I'm curious, like, what is your experience like? Have you had anybody on your boat that's never caught one or never seen one, and their first impression with the species was with you. And just, I want you to, like, I don't know, I like to hear those things. So tell me what that's been
man.
like.
That's great. That's happened many times, and in fact, I mean, there's nothing that gets me more geeked really than like someone that's excited to get a new species, and you can set them up for that experience, but because the boat is such a cool fish, like to tell somebody like, oh, you're going to dangle your fly in front of this fish, and it's going to like it's not going to seem interested, or it's just going to crush your fly, and you carry that hook and like get ready for like a battle, like it's going to be a scrappy battle right at the boat side, and like they're kind of trying to process how that might like unfold, and then when you see it actually unfold exactly like that, and you see them light up, I mean, there's nothing better to me like that. Standing platform and setting them up for that is something that I look forward to every season. I love it. I've had really cool experiences. People have reached out to me specifically saying they want to catch a bowfin. Had somebody booked for next year. That's all she wants. She wants to get a bowfin. That's a box she wants to check, and it's just cool to know that you can do confidence and like the right time of day, the right time of year. You can do it over and over again. I mean, it's great.
Well, I think it's an interesting one too, because it's a fish that they're very accessible and they're pretty prevalent throughout most of the eastern United States. So it's like, I think part of it too, though, is that you can catch a bowfin in almost just about anywhere, but where you're doing it, it's got to be part of the allure for people who want to come and travel there and do that with you, because I don't know of anywhere else. I mean, I know we spoke a little bit about it on like Instagram, and you can get similar sort of looks in like some of the springs here in Florida, but most of those are, it's not even legal to fish in. But I can't think of anywhere else where you're fishing them in 100% visibility. Like down where I'm at, there's so much, tannins in the water. It's all black water. I mean, and in the black water, the bowfin turned black. So you got these just black fish and black water laying on a black bottom, and you just knocked. You could be in, 12 inches of water and not know that they're there. But just where you're doing it is so awesome to me. Like I would literally come from Florida all the way up to where you're at to experience catching a fish that I've caught thousands of just to be able to do it where you're doing it at. So that's awesome. But I'm kind of curious though, like your approach, like your approach is what's interesting to me, because, I've caught a lot of them, but I don't ever want to get like set in my way. They still seem to kind of do something different almost every time. But like, I just am curious, like your approach as a fly angler who's fishing, you're throwing something artificial in front of them. I'm doing it the easy way and putting a bloody chunk of stinky meat in front of their face. It's a little bit of an easier game. But like when you gear up for a day to go chase bowfin, like what are you looking for? Like where like what water features are you trying to find? Like what pattern of movement or style of fly, just like for the interested fly angler that knows that he's got bowfin nearby, what advice would you give somebody?
You're looking for the marshy water. I mean, I do a lot of Google Map kind of trying to snipe spots. I look for coast areas of the coastline that I is worth exploring. And when you're looking at Google Maps, I mean, that's kind of my approach always when I'm searching new water. I'm looking for dark water. I'm looking for marshy water. And usually what that means is that water's going to warm up a little quicker in the spring. And that tends to be an area that'll keep those bowfin as that marshland begins to get more vegetation, stuff like that. The bowfin will stay there. They don't really move too much. But I found that as we've been patterning and learning the ones in Lake St. Clair specifically, because that lake is almost like a river, like the water's flowing through it. And there's lots of where I fish, especially in the Delta, you'll find some of the bigger bowfin are holding on kind of marshy lily pad pencil reed flats that are adjacent to like a deeper channel. There's deeper water nearby. That's where you can find the sort of the alpha, the big ones, the big females. and I've sort of just been like cracking that code, finding the big ones, and so that then it comes down to stocking them. So you're in the bowfin area. I happen to have a skiff that can get into 4 inches of water, so it's really nice to just not worry. You can go virtually anywhere with this boat, and you have the pole. Your approach. I mean, I always try to be quiet. I try to that's a skill set in its own. Getting into this water, you can spook fish pretty easily, but with the bowfin in particular, they tend to be more curious. They'll actually hear you coming, and a boat wouldn't have noticed will show itself. And at that point, if you're not moving too fast, kind of slow down, and you have a nice little window of that fish being curious and not having a fight or flight response. And all you got to do is get that down. And what most fly anglers actually struggle with, which is kind of interesting, is everybody picks up a fly rod, and everybody wants to learn how to cast, and that's a huge part of being a fly fisherman is your cast. That's 100% what your game is in most scenarios. If you can't cast, you're going to be able to catch a fish.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize, it could be an amazing fly fisherman and have no short game. Like the idea of catching a fish that's closer to you than your 9-foot rod, the tip of your 9-foot rod, that sets up a whole conundrum for people right off the bat. And then this to go ahead and set like a vertical hook set, because the rods are so parabolic, they don't have that torque that most rods have. So your hook set's nothing. Like a straight vertical hook set on a fish with a hard mouth, I mean, it's really hard to get that dialed in. So
right.
That whole thing, that's kind of stuff I go over with my clients, like how to do it, how to strip set into them, how to fight them, keep them, keep their head below the water. Once they get their head out and they're shaking, that's when they usually shake the hook. So that type of battle, and that sort of thing. But we can also set up the shot where you can cast to them. So we have the luxury of having an expansive flat, especially more so in the spring when the vegetation isn't so thick. In some of the bowfin flats, you can get some good long shots at them and drag a fly in front of them, and they act just like a bass. I mean, they'll swim up and crush a fly. They'll crush a topwater. We've sight fished topwater to them. I don't do it as much as I really want to or should. I feel like that's something that I'm into this year a little bit more, is committing to some top water for these fish, try to get them to come up. So yeah, multiple ways we can approach them. But yeah, that's the big thing. And then a lot of people want to ask me about what type of flies work, and I found that their eyesight, we all know they don't have the best eyesight.
Right.
They're more of a feel fish. So I feel like black is just my color for that specific species. Black would be my go-to, and I don't think the fly needs to be all that big. I think it's more mechanics. I've had people, I've seen people tie flies for bowfin. Usually they're using like big, hot, like 1/0 hooks, big, thick hooks. And I feel like my approach is a little different. I feel like that's, it's harder to find the softer spots of their mouth with a thicker, bigger hook. I feel like just something that's a little thin, but also strong. Just a quality hook, laser sharp, whatever that is. A partridge size 4 is plenty. But I have a little method that I use where I tie my flies to where the back hook is articulated, and actually the only hook is the hook in the back, and it's on a shank, so it swivels or moves around. And I found that particular pattern keeps them buttoned a little bit better in my experience, because that hook is able to find the softer part of their mouth. And that's been something I've been kind of experimenting with now for a couple seasons. And my hookup to fish to net ratio has been dramatically improved. It's been
Yeah,
nice.
I wonder if that probably serves some benefit too. To like, I mean, as you know, they don't really play as much the power game where they're like bulldogging with just raw strength. It's more just the utter chaos that they do when they're fighting. So I know sometimes my problem has been like even with bait fishing, there's still some parallels. I think even in the way that we think is, I see people that use really big hooks down here to catch them the same way. I use very small, like a size 1 bait holder hook, really small hooks. For it to just work better for me. I've never had an issue with them. I have an issue with the hook point bending, like the tip of the hook.
Yeah.
Not so
you
much
get
like
that bone.
the shank bending out. So I've downsized my hooks a lot. Even the biggest ones I catch on fairly small hooks. But the curiosity thing,
That's good to hear that.
yeah. Well, that kind of made me. And then as far as like the way that they go crazy, I had similar issues. Like when I very first started fishing for them, I mean I was a kid, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was using steel leaders. I was going way over the top. And they got teeth. They got teeth. You got to have steel leaders. But it's not a pliable. I don't know. I mean, they for the most part they don't care. They're not going to drop it, but it's not pliable enough to where when they start twisting it and turning and death rolling it, like the leader works against you and ends up pulling the hook out of their mouth. Then I moved to doing like a fluorocarbon leader just for abrasion resistance. But you should always have fluorocarbon because it's clear. Then I kind of realized they don't give a damn if you.
No, they don't.
They don't care if what your leader looks like. So now what I'm doing now presently is I just use like 200-pound braid or 150-pound braid section, like a foot long. It's abrasion resistant enough, but it's also like supple to the bite. It's a soft bite. If they're going to be curious or shy about a line, it's not so bad because it's a soft bite and it's extremely pliable. The line twists and turns and folds over on itself. So when they start death rolling and going absolutely ballistic, I don't have as much of an issue of it pulling out. But the curiosity thing made me laugh because I've also noticed that, and they've always been like a head scratcher to me because there's been ones where I'll see them in like the canals we have in the Everglades. Is one of the environments that you can sight fish from here. Very easy. It's a lot of fun too. We've got these long canals in the Everglades, just right along the roadside, and you get out of your car and you put on a little backpack with some gear and one rod, and you just start walking. So it's great bait fishing. It's a unique way of fishing, in one of the most awesome areas in the entire country, wildlife wise. But you're also kind of up at a high vantage point. All the canals are pretty shallow. They're still a little bit tannic, but it's not like tannic water is still clear water. That's what a lot of people don't know. It's like it's not dirty water, but you can see them. But there will be times on that canal, like those canals, I will be standing right over the top of the fish. They're sitting there, and I can bounce a shiner off their head. I can bounce a jig off their head. They will not bite, but they're not running from me. They're not evading. No. So I'm like, well, does this thing know I'm here? And it's just playing the like, I don't know, if I just lie still, maybe they'll go away game, but it's interesting. But as far as the curiosity,
is that in the spring? Is that in the
Well, it's probably been more summer times that I've done that. Normally in the winter, I don't mess around in the Everglades for bowfin. But I mean, where I'm at, I can fish year round. It's always warm. I mean, I'm about to start sweating and I'm out here on my porch right now. But what's funny is like when I'm bait fishing for them, almost every time without fail, especially when I'm like, because normally I'll pull up against the bank and then I just sort of spider out some lines in different parts of the water and sit there and wait. Almost every single time without fail, when I'm doing it, at least one bowfin will come and we'll make eye contact and they'll just sit there and be watching me. And I'll just watch them. I'm like, do I need to like reel one of my rods in real quick and like put this thing in front of his face? But yeah, it was like one of the last times I was out, one came up and was watching, like just looking at the boat and curiosity. Like it's
how cool is that, man?
And it had this very distinct scar across its nose, and then it slowly turned and then took off. And then about 10 minutes later, I think it was the same fish. It was a nice sized fish too. It was a big one. I ended up catching one and it had the scar on its nose. I'm like, is that the same fish? Like, this is nuts. But it is almost eerie how fearless they are to come up and check something out. So, but
Yeah,
you're on.
I love that when you sort of interest and you see that fin, that dorsal fin to start moving, and
Yeah.
it's that curiosity, like, oh, something's gonna go down, and they're just processing it, and then they're like, all right, kill, all right, gone.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point too. Is that does seem like to be like the I don't know, the indicator that they're going to bite. But the ones that I'm talking about in the Everglades, you would see no fin moving. It's just completely inanimate. But yeah, once that fin gets going, you kind of know it. Oh, okay, they're charging.
I've seen them
up.
like that. I've seen the males get like that in the spring when they're kind of getting ready to start guarding the babies. You'll find them kind of lockjaw, and obviously if they're with a bunch of baby bowfin, what do you call a baby bowfin?
Just a fry ball, like
a fry ball. Yeah. Super cool to see.
Yeah,
but we leave those guys alone, obviously.
Yeah, I don't mess. Well, I only want to catch the female ones. At this stage, I'm all about the big ones. But I don't know. The males kind of
really lit up ones.
The males kind of. Oh yeah. Well, now that's another thing too. I'm really envy. Like we are bowfin, and you probably saw the recent news about now they've kind of identified two separate species. I had been saying for years because I used to fish them in northwest southwest Arkansas, where it's more. I think it's the same like variant you've got. Whatever it is, Amia ocelicata or something like that. I can't even pronounce it.
Yeah. Right.
And we'd get the same fired up, like flared up neon green, like wildly colored males. And then we moved to South Carolina and Georgia and Florida. And you do not see, even at peak spawn, nothing. You will not see males. Man. Yeah, it's kind of a letdown.
Do they have the spot on the tail? Do they have
they do have the spot, but sometimes you'll see like very faint green and like the pec fins. But beyond that, it's just nothing. So I'm like, we just kind of have the gnarly, like stumpy black ones or like dark ones. Right. But I'm kind of jealous of the color variations you get to enjoy. And then I've seen that I'm really jealous that you've caught the melanistic ones. That's gnarly.
Yeah, man, those are cool. Yeah, we got a few locals that they show up every year. I actually, one of the coolest bowfin I ever got was I don't think it was a full albino because it had its eyes were dark, but it was a hypomelanistic, or I don't know, hypo. So it was basically an albino. It's white. That was one of the coolest fish.
I don't remember what the term for that. It's like leucistic or something, or those are like the gold ones. I don't remember, but yeah.
Whatever it was, it was definitely it was like a white bowfin. Then it was pretty freaking cool. That was out of Lake Huron, and we have a kind of another little flat out there that produces tons of them. But not in the size that we get out of Lake St. Clair, but still like makes for a really cool bowfin expedition. We go out probably once or twice a year now and just go for bowfin out there and have a blast.
Right. Well, that's awesome. I don't know. I could sit here and talk bowfin the entire time, but I don't want to short sell the people that are listening on like what your diverse fishery is like, because I don't even know what to tackle next time. I know you do the muskie thing as well, muskie on the fly. I'm interested in that one because it's one that I've yet to catch. It's one I really want to catch, but you're doing the muskie on, and then on top of doing something that's already really difficult, you're making it more difficult by going after them on the fly. I mean, are you chasing them in the same areas you're chasing the bowfin, or is this like a totally different game, or like what is that like?
Oh man, it's stupid. It's what it is. It's just plain stupidity. Fly fishing is, you're at a disadvantage a lot of times. There are times when fly fishermen like have the advantage with just if the fish are feeding on something that's light and small. Sometimes you can have the advantage of casting something that's translucent and doesn't have any weight to it, and really outfish the gear guys. But muskie fishing, it's anything but. It's more of just a pursuit that if you're like me and you're like a lot of people out there, you sort of find it in the world of fly fishing and realize it's kind of a cool thing to do. So there's a lot of novelty to catching a a muskie in general, but a muskie on a fly rod is super cool. It's a very tactile thing, fly fishing. You've done it enough to know that you have the rod and you're holding the line. So every move fish makes, it's very tactile, and just to experience that with a fish as cool as a muskie is just kind of an intimate thing. Man, it messes up your body. There's a lot. It's come a long way in terms of the gear, in terms of the fly design, the lines that we cast now it's never been a better time to get into musky fly. There's a lot of even companies, TFO is my company. That's what I'm endorsed by. So they have a pretty cheap way of getting into that musky sport by getting, their BC big fly rod. It's, entry level $500, and you have yourself a really good musky stick to fish. But whereas before, you would have to buy something a little bit more expensive, and it's kind of a commitment. But it does go a long way to have the right gear when you're going to be doing it. And that's kind of what I waited for. I was good. I was okay on the muskie thing. I did it. I went out with a guide and I caught a real big muskie, 49-inch muskie. I got real lucky. My first real Lake St. Clair muskie was with a guide. Went super far out to Canada side and caught that thing, and it was a cool box to check. But I had no desire to pursue it myself. I just knew my boat wasn't big enough. I knew that there was a lot of intel that I didn't have, and I was doing my own thing on the flats. And slowly but surely, man, I'd start seeing them on the flats. And so I kind of got into TFO, got connected to them, got myself a couple muskie rods because I knew I wanted to do it eventually. And so I started carrying muskie rods on the boat. And man, we occasionally see muskie that work their way up in areas where we could find not necessarily into the bowfin habitat, more so the drum and bass habitats. We'll see them. And just this last year or this last summer, we got one. We got a really big muskie on a flat sight fishing, pulling up to it. I had a muskie rod rigged up and ready to go. My best buddy Dave was on the bow. I was like, dude, put down your rod, grab that muskie rod, and just hold on, man. And I pulled it to this fish, and it ate twice. So I mean, talk about apex predator, right? That's a good thing with the bowfin too. If you set the hook and the hook comes out, these fish, typically will eat again. Muskie are less so like that, but this particular muskie ate twice, and he was able to get it in. The first one, he hooked it, and it somehow came unbuttoned. But that's going to be the first. That was the first muskie we've caught on the flats, and I've seen plenty more to know that from now on I'm going to have that rod. That's not a first time occurrence. It's going to happen again for sure. So. But yeah, to answer your question, man, that's just now really passionate about, and I've gained enough knowledge now to know where I can go with my little boat. And it's, I can find little areas in the lake, St. Clair, it's a big giant plate. It's not a bowl. It's more of a shallow water lake. There's nothing to it. But you have these this in the delta that I fish, you have these channels that come out into the main lake, and that's kind of like a drop off or a dredged area. And it becomes sort of the only structure. Any sort of little change becomes like a major deal for fish like a muskie, especially in the fall when they're kind of getting into their zones where they're trying to put on the calories.
Yeah.
So it's not that far for me, not that dangerous for me to get out there on those musky spots and pursue them. And that's what we're doing, man. We're out there just casting our arms off over and over again, waiting to come up. And when it happens, it's the coolest fucking thing. I mean, to be able to do that and just do it independently, that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's a species I may take a stab at this year. It's just got to happen soon for me. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't try to go chase things out of the U.S. before I like go after that one. But I've done it. I have muskie fish, I think 5 or 6 different times. There was a very small lake in Missouri when I was living in Arkansas. It was like a 4-hour drive, but I had gone there and I saw them every single time. Every time I went up there, I'd have the follows. Or there was one time I was fumbling around like re-rigging, and I was like, I was in a little John boat in a in a fallen tree, just kind of sitting against the like exposed tree limbs, and I look up and there's just one swimming by the boat. I was like, oh my gosh. But I could never seal the deal on him. I think I got one solid bite one time, but I didn't realize it. And I hope I might sound like an idiot because I don't have any experience with these things. Do they roll? Do they break the surface? Like almost, I don't know if it's for the same purpose, but similar. So I kept seeing them doing that. I'm like, am I seeing gar? Like, what is that? Mm-hmm. And so finally I got to a point where I didn't know muskie do that. But the one shot I got at one, I had seen one roll within casting range. I just like launched this swim bait out there, and they got murdered by it. And I had it hooked for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 seconds tops, and it was gone. And then we ended up moving. It's such a mental
game. It's all up here, man. The game it's so mental. And then it beats you up, and that's a weird thing. I must be. In fact, I know I am. The harder the challenge, man, the more I become obsessed. And it's really gotten into my head through that mental game, through getting beat up to those points on the water where I'm like doubting everything that I'm doing. Like, what the hell do I have any? I mean, you're grasping at straws, trying to find any sort of concrete, like, is this the right thing? Is this what they're going to eat? And then when they do, you realize they're just a dumb fish, man. They you got to find the right fish. I find the fish that's willing to eat, and every muskie is out there, and the thing about them is that they have their windows, they have their moments when they want to eat, and when they do, there's no better fish designed to crush a swim bait than a muskie, and they will absolutely use 100% of their skill to just get the job done. But that in that interim, those follows and the fish that are just coming in, they're just curious. Those are fish that aren't quite there yet. And you could do things to coax them. You can get better. Of course, I'm no expert, but I'm getting better at it. So I'm finding myself a little bit more like in the zone, like a little bit more in the game of those follows, and I'm able to make better decisions. But in the beginning, man, it was just like my legs were going to give out. I was going to fall to my knees, man. Like I was so up over this fish, and it's been cool. It's been cool to kind of.
I think that was my problem, is the ones that did follow, that seemed interested and were pretty keyed in on the lure. I just lost all composure. I was like, as soon as I saw them, I started shaking. I didn't know what I was doing, and so there was like, I know that's like the critical moment where you got to do whatever, like the figure eights and the this and that, just to try to get that boat side bite. But that wasn't happening for me. I saw him. I didn't know what I was doing. I stopped the lure in front of him. I freaked the hell out and dropped the ball. But
been there so many times. Yeah. I know the feeling, man. Yeah. You'll get another shot, man. You'll get it.
No, but I know. I mean, just kind of staying on I don't know, maybe the category of like rough fish, but it's the fly fishing for carp too, is like the other one that you do, and you catch big ones. That's really interesting to me because I've caught a lot of carp, but I've always done it with bait. I've done the European style carp fishing,
which is super cool.
Long rods. It's interesting just to be able to experience like the way that other people do things. I don't have those setups, but I got a good friend that does, and this guy named Austin Anderson. He's like,
I know who that is.
Yeah,
he's out of Michigan too, right?
No, this kid Austin Anderson. He's a young guy, and he's from Texas, and he is like, if you look up like Austin Anderson, or like, I don't know, if you look up pictures of like buffalo fishing or U.S. based carp fishing with like European style, you'd be hard pressed to go through the search results without coming across some of his fish, because he like catches like those next level like category giants, multiple like 50, 60 pound, especially
40
buffalo.
Pound is small to that. So
I went out and did that with him early last year in Texas, and we caught so many. It was more buffalo, but we were catching the carp too. But we caught so many buffalo, and we had tallied like the size of these fish, and like of all the ones we got, it was like well over a dozen fish, and the average fish was over 40 pounds. But we got one that was over 50 and one that was over 60, and these are just these obnoxious fish. But he does the fly fishing for carp as well, but it's nothing I've never done. But I know that that's one that's like really taken off here in the States. So it's
I mean,
carp,
dude, it's to break it down. I mean, it's
yeah.
like people go so far and spend so much money to chase bonefish, and a carp is essentially. I think it's a prettier fish than a bonefish. I mean, bonefish live in really pretty places, and they have their own beauty. But I mean, a carp, it fights all the same. It's harder to catch. They're smarter. They take a little bit more skill, but they also live in the Great Lakes, man. And when you're on a flat on the Great Lakes, man, especially Lake Michigan, you might as well be in the Keys or else tropical. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So they're not all in ugly little back ponds and marsh areas. They're
Right.
They live in beautiful places too, and they fight. They'll get you into your backing on a fly rod. I mean, there's no stronger fish, really. I mean, aside from maybe a sturgeon in the Great Lakes system.
Yeah, they're definitely a powerhouse. And I love our native buffalo, but the carp are just significantly more, in my experience with them, much more powerful, like superior in probably every way.
I've never caught a buffalo, so I was actually going to ask you about that.
They look alike. That's just about it. And they feed on some similar things, but like the way that they take is different. It's just a different fish. I love them and they get big, but like the fight's not. I feel like the carp are a much more aggressive fight. But yeah, it's been my observation too. Like I never chased carp even with artificial lures on any kind of tackle. But I mean, I encounter them all the time when I'm going after other things. Not anymore. There's like no common carp where I'm at in Florida. But like in South Carolina on Lake Moultrie, you had a lot of common carp. In the areas I fished in Texas, is the same thing. And it was like they just seem like a really spooky fish too. Like they're much more cautious. They're very keenly aware that you're there. You can't really it's a harder fish to sneak up on. I had a big deal with it. Have you caught the grass carp? Do y'all have grass carp up there?
No, unfortunately not. It's a little bit of a far drive south to get into those. Definitely, that's a fish I'd love to experience. Yeah, I know a couple guys that get into them.
They're another one that was just strangely, especially the ones that were in the lakes or like bigger water. They're a really, really tough one to sneak up on. And it was almost like I think I can see why some people have problems with them because I'd be out, fishing on the flats of Lake Moultrie in South Carolina. And if you come across like a pad field or a grassy flat that's got a bunch of grass carp in it, I mean, if you like drop your pin on the bottom of the boat, you can look up and see 100 yards worth of like just whales kicking up a wake, like blasting everything in their path. And you pretty much blow out the entire flat. Like, oh my gosh, they're really that spooky. But they also it's giant. So
another crazy thing sort of developed this last summer. So we've got an amazing carp fishery in Michigan, and for a long time, occasionally we'd always take a cast at them from the towee from the boat, and every now and then you'd just get this happy carp that wasn't paying attention and it would eat the fly. But for the most part, if you're in a boat, they have such a good sense of the water pressure. So they sense that boat coming. Whereas other fish, maybe, they might start acting a little funny, but they're not going to like full panic mode. Carp, usually when the towee gets in the range of a cast, they know you're there. And so that wasn't really a game that I really figured was worth truly developing until I heard a podcast. This guy, Luke Jenner, he's got a flats guide service out of Wisconsin, I believe. and he was talking about how he guides carp out of his towie, and he finds water that's not so clear, and he uses that to his advantage. So you can get in shallow water and kind of use the protection of the water, and obviously it takes a lot of skill to get close to him, but a lot of his game is just straight vertical dapping for him, and it just kind of reset my brain. It was the reset I needed to really take another look at it. And so this last spring we found water, and man, got into a ton of carp off the boat, which is really nice. So that's a new fishery to me, and I'm just really excited to sort of cultivate that. So that's part of Lake Erie that we were on, and we were getting some big Great Lakes carp in water that's a foot and a half deep, and just certain areas where they all come to pre-spawn. So we got into that, which kind of upped my confidence to try it on Lake St. Clair. And I started changing my, just my approach, where I was going ridiculously slow, using, as much stealth as I could, down to the clothes that I wore, like full camo, and really just taking every precaution I could. And I discovered that they aren't impossible. And we got in some really nice home water fish. And the cool thing about the delta that I'm fishing, one of the coolest things is you're not competing with anybody. There's nobody else there. Yeah. And if there is, it's a bow hunter, and they're like scaring all the carp away before they even get a shot at them. So that's occasionally you see that, but nobody else doing what I'm doing out there. And so you have these carp that are just massive. They're beautiful. They're untouched in clear water, and I can crack your coat, or made some major advantages at actually pursuing those fish, which it's been really cool. It's nice to progress at what you do, like.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I know for the longest time people just thought of them as being some fish that kicks up mud and moles around on the bottom and just vacuuming up random crap. But I mean, I learned a lot when I went out with Austin Anderson, and because he's actually, the interesting thing about that guy is his dynamic as an angler, or like the spectrum that he operates on. If he's not doing the Euro style like carp fishing thing with setting up bait and being out there on rods on pods, he's like a competitive bass angler. I'm like, that's interesting, because he's like so far on the opposite end. I mean, he's die hard, like fishing tournaments, all that stuff. But then the other end, so he kind of operates from that mind frame of like hunting the fish and learning the patterns. And I'd never thought about it, but like, when we got out there to where we were fishing, we were fishing this big, massive, we were fishing Lake Fork, which is like, one of the most popular bass lakes in the country. And we were fishing directly facing into the wind. Like the wind was just howling. There was waves lapping up on the shore. We're getting wet. There's mist all over us. I'm like, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. Like, this is a horrible spot. But he like kind of explained to me that he intentionally will like look at the wind patterns, because he's like, I always go to the side of the lake that's catching the brunt of the wind, because it's blowing it. Like, he wants to go where all like the sediment is blowing towards. And I would think even for like chasing them, that may be advantageous to follow similar patterns to where you're not, I don't know, going. I mean, it's got to be harder to sneak up on them in calm, crystal clear water. Maybe there's something to chasing those wind patterns and going to the more wind blown parts of the lake that have been muddied up a little bit more. Who knows? But it's
I mean, for a lake, like, when you're fishing from shore, and that's where all the food's going to be, right? That's kind of, that makes a lot of sense. All the sediment, all the food, and the fish kind of follow suit. We had a really cool lake back home in California that had a locust like hatch of yellow hoppers, and that was exactly it, man. Wherever the wind was blowing, you go to that. Actually, no, you would you go to the opposite side of the wind was blowing, not because that's where, I mean, if you were to walk along the shoreline, you could basically kick up a bunch of grasshoppers because the wind's blowing onto the water, you could basically chum grasshoppers on the water just by taking a little stroll along the shoreline, and then in minutes just no, and they just kind of just calooping all these little yellow grasshoppers, and then you just throw in light tackle, fly lines. Man, it was a blast. But yeah, just crazy amounts of approaches to these fish, where, you know, in my scenario, it is just all about stealth. It's all about just not running into the fish's house, just going as slow as you can. And some of these fish, you know, will kind of swim to you, you know, they don't making any noise, and you're just really, you know, quiet and slow and still. That's the only way you can get done. And apparently before that, I had just a little bit more of a rough touch, I guess, and it kind of, you know, eliminated all that factor. The worst part for me is just having any sort of like chop where the chop starts bouncing off the boat. That'll get them going, but you have to angle the boat appropriately to avoid that.
Yeah, no, it's that's interesting. I guess the other thing I've been kind of curious about, and I think I know the answer to it. I mean, I try to look people up before I get them on here and talk to them. But like, so like, what do you do career wise? Are you in the medical field, right?
Yeah, I'm a nurse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been a nurse since 2006.
So the interesting thing about that is you're the third guy that I've had on here that does that job. I'm like, what? And there's another one coming on next week that does the same thing. I'm like, what? Is there something to this? Like, and so I haven't done that, but I got a deep appreciation for the people that do. But I've done some time in law enforcement, so it's like understanding the stresses of the job, or, you know, being a first responder, or basically, you know, the guy that I talked to most recently is this guy named Andrew Bunker, and he fishes out of like northern Ontario, but he flies up to these like small remote Inuit villages way up there in like the Arctic. So he flies into these places and just does medical work. And what he described almost sounds more like a tour of duty than anything, because he's going up there. And, you know, I think of these people, Inuits, that live in the harshest environment you can imagine in the Arctic. And it's for the most part, and when you look at these places, he's got these phenomenal photos. This guy, Andrew Bunker, you'd have to look him up. He's not on Instagram or any of that, but he does have a website.
Cool.
If you just look at, but the photos of these places are wild because it's in the middle of nowhere. But I'm like, okay, so these got to be like the toughest people in the world. So if they're at a point where they're calling for help, I'm sure it's a big issue. And in an industry that's already hurting for staffing, or hurting for proper training, or people who really know what they're doing and are well equipped mentally and whatever physically for those long shifts to handle that, and then to, I don't know, mix it with that environment. It's just I go off on these thought tangents. I want to know that kind of background, because for him it made a little bit more sense that he's a really passionate writer. He's like really into his writing. His blogs are phenomenal, and I love blogging myself. I like writing myself, but like he paints a really vivid picture of his experiences and places that he goes. It's awesome. Nice. So I'm like, okay, well, it kind of makes sense, because, you know, if you're dealing and juggling with that kind of stress, I would think that's enough to make you go crazy. But then he escapes into these places that are just like aesthetically as beautiful as you can imagine, and he's writing about it. So then I know that your other hobby outside of that line of work is fishing, but it's also like you're in music. I've been seeing your stories lately. You do a lot of that. I mean, what does that do for you? I know this isn't fishing related, but like, I like to know more about what drives people. You know what I mean? So it's like you're a musician and an angler, and I'm sure you have other hidden talents as well.
That's pretty much it, man. Those are my three identities. I mean, I've always sort of been drawn to art, but somehow found myself in the nursing career, and that was for me. Like I didn't really grow up knowing or wanting to be in the medical career. Always sort of been like a punk rocker, skateboarder, and then my dad was an artist, so like I artistic talents. I could draw and paint and stuff like that. And so music sort of found me early on with the punk rock, and it became, I was in a punk band for years and years, and became enamored with that whole lifestyle of just being a musician. And I remember, kind of early on, like having a girlfriend that's like, oh, you're just interested in music, you don't have any goals in life, and like kind of like thinking, oh, okay, it's being young, and like, oh, maybe I should like think about something else, and sort of opened a door in my brain. But the nursing thing kind of fell out, and the big sale was, you working 3 days a week, you can work 3 12s and have all the time in the world to do your hobbies. And I've been fishing since I was a toddler. So my dad used to take me fishing when I was real young, and it's always been something I've always done. So that was always there. But the nursing thing just kind of fell on me, and then I ended up really enjoying the change of going to school for something a little more serious. I never really took school seriously until I got in nursing, and that sort of became a nice change of pace in my early 20s, and never really looked back. I look at it as one of the best sort of I've ever made. It's been a great career to have. It's afforded me to do whatever I want. And the flexibility, and my background's in trauma for the first 11 years. In trauma neuro, really intense stuff, and I found it gave me sort of appreciation for life, and for living your life to the fullest, taking your life, not taking it too seriously, and living day by day. I try to live my life as if if I tell people, like, I don't have a goal to retire. I feel like I'm already retired. 3 days a week, and I enjoy my job, and the rest of the week I spend doing what I want to do. My wife's a nurse. Same deal. She's in school. She's going to get a higher education.
Yeah.
But she's going to do well for herself, and so we live within our means. We don't have kids. We have 2 dogs. We're both only children, so I think that kind of works a lot in our relationship, where we
dogs are easier than kids.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a lot of freedom to do what we want, and so that's been a good journey for me. And then the music thing, man, there's been times where I've been in bands and toured and done it more seriously, but it's really I kind of view it like my friends that used to play basketball in school, and then they're kind of older adults, and they go and like do pickup games like that. That's how I look at music. Like for me, like I just have a group of friends. I live in Detroit's a very musical city,
right?
And I've met enough people here to where like I just get calls, or I can book a gig and play, and it's like a sense of camaraderie. It gets me out of the house, keeps me young, keeps me limber, and it's something I've always done. I've loved playing drums and percussion, and do all kinds of music. I pretty diverse taste, but a lot of the stuff I do in this city now is more experimental, more jazz based, more improvised based, which has just been more creative side. It's been fun.
That's cool. And then I mean the kind of work that you're doing is obviously noble and meaningful. I mean, and I did the law enforcement thing for a while, and I admit I got out of it after a few years. Just I felt like I needed, I don't know, a little bit more. I did have kids, you know what I mean? I got to a point where it's all right, well, may need to look at something that's a little more reward, a little less personal risk. Oh yeah, can't get hurt in it. But and like many former law enforcement officers, you go through a period of struggling with like, well, I had a job where I might be able to save somebody, or I might be able to make like an impact on somebody's life. And, I went through a period where that was kind of like a big downer for me, but I think I'm beyond that now. But anyway, yeah, it's good too that like you can supplement that income with something that you enjoy. I've always kind of thought of that, like, got the guiding thing. I'm like, I could do that, but I don't know if I could like do that strictly. I don't know if I could do it in such a way that is the way that I like me providing for my family, it hinges upon me being successful in that. Who knows? The idea scares me personally, but also I don't know, the market for taking people out to catch big bowfins not as big as it needs to be either. So,
well, if we stick around, man, maybe it'll get there. But as far as my conundrum with the whole thing as well was, I've got the job that provides money, so I don't want to get into guiding and be this guy that is never available to get out there.
Right.
So I for me, like, that was kind of the biggest. Um, and it's been good because I don't really like advertise so much. I just have the little like blurb on my Instagram, and that's
Yeah.
it. So people hit me up, and for years since I moved out here, people have asked me, and I've always said no because I wasn't a guide and I wasn't going to pretend. And got to know a couple really great guides in the area, and they kind of gave me the words of encouragement, especially after they saw the fishery. They said, you should be guiding on this. This is too special of a fishery. Yeah. And, it's clear I enjoy taking people fishing and sharing. But it's been really great. And just the small, amount of people that found their way to my Instagram and gone out on the boat with me. It's just been such a positive experience. But I'm not doing it for the money. I can charge just enough to keep maintenance on my motor and pay for some stuff and keep doing what I like doing where I want it to be. But I do find myself kind of daydreaming sometimes. I really enjoy it. So it'd be interesting to do it full time, or I'm kind of envious of that lifestyle to a certain degree.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and I like that, and that's been kind of a common theme on the people that I've picked to have on here. Is I think it's easy to want to do all this stuff and keep it all for yourself, or what you hope to get out of the experience is all self-serving.
Yeah, right.
I want to build my social media. I want to build my name. I want to build my whatever. But I mean, to be in the frame of mind where you're, I don't know. I imagine it's a real educational experience. I mean, you got a phenomenal fishery, clearly, and I would have never even known the diverse kind of fishery you have if I wasn't, looking at your page. So you sharing that and through images, but also sharing it by taking people out there and doing it that is all in the name of, pushing the sport forward, and especially planting the seeds and some of these different kinds of fish you're doing. Because
it really feels like a culture. It feels like a culture, and there's a platform to sort of grow this. And when you're a part of it, it's really satisfying to connect with people. Like you. That's a big deal, man. You're such an amazing fisherman. You've been all over. You've caught so many amazing fish, and just the fact, a year ago, Drew pointed you out to me, and here we are talking right now. This is like a cataclysm of what is available to us right now, and through this social media experiment. It's
and I appreciate that, and I also know, I mean, that a big motivation behind doing this, and believe it or not, this is way outside my comfort zone. I'm a very extremely introverted person in my personal life.
Likewise, man.
I do not go out of my way to meet new people, and I know that I should, but it's I get home from a week of work, and my wife may say, "Oh, I met such and such in the neighborhood, and her husband fishes." And I'm I don't want to meet him. And I don't know why. It's a character flaw.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But at the same time,
so funny.
it's you meet these people on the internet, which sounds kind of, I don't know, cliche, but there's guys that I've known for years since I was a kid on the internet, but we've never spoken a word. And to me, it's starting to feel strange. So, I don't want to exist like this either. I don't want my relationships to exist here. So it's I can read people's words and I can read a description about a fish, but it's I feel like this is a better format to understand or to see the authenticity in somebody's passion for what they're doing. So
in a way, it's the greatest format, man. It's kind of, I love podcasts. I love listening to them. I spend a lot of my time driving, listening to podcasts, and it's kind of changed the whole game. There's no better
Well,
way to get to know
it's
somebody than long
interesting
form.
because podcasting and video really swallowed up and killed the blog, which is, that's where I started. I started blogging like 2011, got away from it for a little bit, and then in recent years I resurrected it. And yeah, I will always write about what I like to do. It's just something I need to do. But people just don't want to read anymore. They'd rather read a short, I don't know, tweet or a caption on a fish picture that's completely unrelated to the fish itself. And so I'm like, well, you know what? I need to evolve, because my whole thing is like, I want to share an experience. I want to teach people about, I don't know, different kinds of fish. And if this is the most efficient way to do that, then maybe I'll cannonball into it. Cause I know some really awesome guys, like people that people need to know about. So that's where I'm going with it. But man, I really appreciate having you on here. I know we're winding down a little bit. We've talked a lot about your guiding and your page, but I haven't, shame on me, I haven't mentioned it at all. Like if somebody wanted to find these photos of the fishing that you're doing, or maybe even send an inquiry about, maybe they've listened to this, heaven forbid they've listened and decided, man, that's pretty awesome what he's doing up there. I actually live pretty close to where he's at. Maybe I'd want to link up with this guy and go do a trip. Like, how can people find you?
It's basically Instagram, man. David Hurl, it's Dave Hurl at Instagram.
That's awesome. Well, I encourage people to go look because it's we harped on the bowfin a lot for my own personal need to hear about it. But if y'all go and check him out, Dave Hurl on Instagram, you're not going to be let down. It's on top of an array of really cool fish. It's in a really cool area. And that boat that you have, I had never. I mean, I've seen Ginus, but the towing boat, that's pretty cool. I like, maybe I'll look into getting one of those things. But yeah,
they're
man.
badass. They're badass little skiffs, man. Love them.
Well, man, I've really appreciated your time. It's been awesome. It's been a good, fulfilling conversation. And I mean,
likewise, Dave.
I really appreciate what you're doing to kind of push, especially some of these other species into the limelight and get them on people's radar because they need to be. And part of me is wants to keep them all to myself, and I don't want other guys encroaching in on my bowfin spots, but I also don't want people stomping them into the ground or throwing them up on the bank. So we gotta be the stewards of our resources and make sure people are not being sold a false narrative. So appreciate you coming on here and helping being part of the right voice and throwing some of that stuff out there.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, David. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Okay.